saw the Steve Urquhart Wire interview with Steve a few weeks back to celebrate his 107th year on air. The thing that stuck out for me, and we're not going to make too many John Peel comparisons, but if you go into the lobby of Radio Lancashire, you will see there, I understand, all across the walls, pictures of the smashy and nicey DJs. People that none of us are ever going to hear about or ever going to care. But there isn't a picture, apparently, of Steve Barker. And he's been broadcasting for Radio Lancashire for 40 years. That's remarkable, and it's sad. And it shows that the BBC, like with John Peel, just don't have a fucking clue what they've got. And we're going to make up for that tonight by listening and loving to Steve. So, ladies and gentlemen, big hand, Steve Barker, Tony Naylor.
Oh, well, they don't need to know. I'm just firing questions. So, I figure most of you know what On The Wire is, so I'm not going to delve necessarily into the technicalities of that. I want to know why this man at the age of 70 is still more interested in new music than most people who are 21. So, on that front, Steve, let's wind back the years. You're in Nelson, in your teens. What was your musical epiphany as a young kid, and what did that do to you? Why have you stuck with this art form so doggedly through the years? And clearly you're still excited by it. So why? What did it do to you at that age?
Well, in my family, my father always had a lot of popular music around, and popular music at the time, and he was a big Frank Sinatra fan. And he kind of got tangentially into a bit of rhythm and blues kind of stuff, with vocal groups, and I just came across this record when I was about 12 or 13 by James Brown called Shake and Shimmy. And it was like ecstasy, audio ecstasy. It was totally wow, and so I used to talk about this and this particular record, and on the school bus, we were going to Nelson Grammar School, and this older and wiser soul, who must have been about 16, with heavy dark ring and glasses on, looked like he was on a serious kind of smack habit, says to me, "Have you heard Ray Charles?" And then I basically went and bought What Did I Say by Ray Charles, and I think that was really the beginning of a trip that I've been on ever since. And so interestingly, what the initial flip into black music was James Brown and Ray Charles.
Is the feeling the same today? When you're listening to Tim Hecker or Sarah Devaki, I'm just picking a couple of names at random of things you've played recently. I mean, does it transport you in the same way it did?
I think it does. I mean, I think it's rare now to come across something absolutely new. There's so much synthesis and fusion. And it's rare to come across absolutely new things. But remarkably, it still keeps happening, doesn't it? It crops up here and there now and again, and it's still it's a bit sad to say, kind of opening a file of WAVs isn't exciting. It's exciting. As up getting a new album, or taking the new album out of its sleeve, though, is it really?
There must be something about you though that still relishes that pursuit.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm too far gone, I think, Tony, to turn back now. I think that's what.
So it's more of a life sentence than a life passion, then.
It is really. It is. I think it is a habit, actually.
So it's a form of autism.
You could say that.
So I just wanted to dig into your timeline prior to On The Wire a little bit, because so you did a journalism degree in the 60s, or you trained as a journalist, is that right?
Trained as a journalist in London at what was the Regent Street Polytechnic, and it's now Westminster University.
ended up working in the civil service into the 70s.
That's right, yeah.
But in this period, so between, I think, 66 and 75,
Yeah.
I've got a little list here, so you saw Bob Dylan at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester. I presume that was the, Judas gig.
Yeah, and the year before, I'm saying 65,
Right.
a Judas gig, which was interesting.
And then in 75, you saw the second Pistols gig.
Yeah, second ever Pistols gig.
And in the intervening years, so you interviewed Jimi Hendrix as a student journalist
Yeah.
in 69.
Yeah.
And then you had this period in Liverpool where you saw, in the space of 2 years, which many people would kill for now, Sun Ra, Captain Beefheart and the Velvets.
That's right.
In Liverpool. So, by nature you'd always pursued the new, clearly. But I mean, what were you doing in music other than you were a punter, presumably, at this point? Were you DJing already, or?
No, I wasn't DJing because I had a family, really, and I didn't have time to do DJs. But it struck me thinking about I was almost Zelig-like at cropping, because that Jimi Hendrix thing, I saw Jimi Hendrix when he appeared with Cream at Regent Street Polytechnic, when he came on stage, that first appearance. And then when I saw the Sex Pistols, I didn't know I was going to go and see the Sex Pistols. I just got asked by a mate, told by a mate. My mate rang me up and said he's got a new band. Should we go and see him? I said, okay. November 1975, Red Lion Square. And he introduced his mate, it was Malcolm McLaren, that was the Sex Pistols. Very, very strange. And
were they any good?
No, they were shy. No, they were really poor. But as were the headline band, the Sex Pistols did support Rugulator, one of the best pub rock bands in
a name that's passed me by, I must admit. Yeah.
But interesting also, I don't know when this, the Free Trade Hall stage or setup as it used to be. When I saw Bob Dylan, it was really interesting because this was the Judas concert. But the setup, it was a sellout concert, and the Free Trade Hall, to sell more tickets, actually put this is very, very weird, put seats behind the band. So when we went to see Bob Dylan, me and my mate, we were actually behind watching the audience
kick off.
And Dylan was like sat in, I remember particularly sat at the piano, with the floodlights, the spotlights shining up on him, and he had this big, what was then like a semi-afro, and you could see his skull right through it. It was very bizarre. So because we were actually behind that stage, that kind of ruckus that happened, it was almost like it was us and the band versus them out there, which I was thinking, what's going on? They were just a lot of retarded old folkies, out there. And basically, that's what it was. And when you see the footage there, of course, that's what it was. It's people.
And that's remained your attitude about music throughout the last few decades, hasn't it? Really.
Absolutely.
Most people will probably associate you with reggae, obviously the dub columnist in the Wire magazine, as well as doing On the Wire. So tell me, where did that love come from? So you were living in Ladbroke Grove in the 70s, is that right?
Yeah, funnily enough, I was never really into any kind of Jamaican music at all, although I do recall going to a pub in Barrowford near Nelson and watching some incredible blue beat dancers in about 1967. Which was a fantastic, but I never kind of checked out the music. But it was actually in Ladbroke Grove. I mean, I worked just around the corner in Latimer Road, right next to Grenfell. Actually, that's where it was. And I worked there in a centre for homeless men. We're trying to resettle men in the community, and the sound on the streets was basically reggae. You just couldn't avoid it. So you're converted by just walking up and down Portobello Road, Ladbroke Grove, going into a few of the pubs around there, and that was it.
You described it to me one time when we talked previously as being the original rebel music, and also you talked about kind of dub being the psychedelic music that psychedelia never was. So, what is it that captured you so specifically about it?
Firstly, I think it was the. I hadn't actually heard any. Bob Marley wasn't necessarily in an elevated position in reggae then. You know, I'd listen to Burning Spear, and it just seemed like a militant music, a political militant music. Well, where is this happening in this country? I thought, you know, because this was almost like pre-punk. In a way, it's like 1975, you know, punk happened. So it's some political music, and also it was rousing music. Then the dub side of it was like what you always wanted psychedelia to be. You know, it take you into totally different kind of spaces, and so it was a double bonus, really, getting into reggae at that time.
If reggae's had its fashionable periods, it's certainly one where I presume it isn't at the minute, or you know, I would view it as not being. I mean, how do you view modern reggae? I mean, I'm, you know, what are you writing about in The Wire on a regular basis? Is it reissues? Is the new stuff coming out that you're excited by, or is it an historic thing for you now?
No, I think it's certainly not gone away. There's reggae is an extremely wide spectrum, so you get very, very commercial reggae coming through, but it goes off the other end now into abstractions. Like you've got labels now like Bouquet Versions who are doing some, you know, coming up with some incredible stuff, as well as new stuff, as well as supporting interesting reissues that we've never seen before. And also, you know, acts like Seekers International are just doing some incredible stuff that seem to be global. And also reggae is now much more global than it's ever been, but almost globally underground as well. So you begin to look, you know, crawl around the neck and look at reggae. It is actually all over South America, all over Africa. It's actually all over the world.
But personally, your interest still lies then, I mean, you know, Bouquet Versions and Seekers, that's the kind of left field outer fringes of reggae now, I suppose, or I think most people would kind of consider it to be. That's still where your interest lies fundamentally then, in that psychedelic end of it, really.
Yes, the weirder the better. Yeah.
So, I don't actually know how you ended up at BBC Lancashire, so how did you land there? I mean, you were freelancing for them, not working there full time, but so how did that come about?
I'm on a freelance contract for 40 years. Yeah. A weekly freelance contract for 40 years. Incredible. I actually, you know, it's okay.
Is there even a contract?
Yeah, they've had to come up with, well, only because of what's been happening over the past few years. You know, I mean, I look at what's been happening over the past few years with, you know, a desperate wry amusement, really, and resignation. You know, it's capped off by the appointment of Zoe Ball as well. She's on Radio 2 and the other one said, I find I give up, you know, really. There is no search for actually genuine talent, you know. It's like when John Peel died, they thought they'd replace him with the guy, what was the guy called?
Rob DeBank did it.
Rob DeBank, how long did that last? You know, and I'm not answering your question, Tony, but I would like.
We will return to the Dissect Radio later, so you know, you'll get your chance on this.
I would like to hear some of the music. You know, there's this new application called BBC Sounds, and so you get your program on there, and underneath your program where the entry is you may also like this. And I don't know, you know, there isn't anything like on the wire in there. I'm looking for. Nearest I get is you know, like a tenth of Dave Rodigan and a fifth of Lake Junction, and you know, a couple of other, but nothing. You know, I'm just wondering, where's the imagination?
It suggested Pete Tong, didn't it?
Yeah, it suggests Pete Tong. Yeah, exactly. And I come to think about, you know, music in its wider sense, because you know, right, for The Wire, and the reason I like writing for The Wire is it does actually go to the extremes. You want to sell more copies, but it does go to the extremes, so you get some stuff that's totally listenable, but I like to listen to it. Yeah.
So without getting all Jeremy Paxman on you,
No.
how did you end up at BBC Lancashire then?
I forget. I'll come back to.
There must have been a conversation at some point.
There was. What happened is there was
how
there was a
did
program.
you even apply, or did you apply?
There was a program. Yeah, I applied. I had to do an audition or an interview, an audition, and we auditioned, and there was this program called RPM, Revolutions Per Minute, run by two women, Jude Bunker and Wendy Howard. And they interviewed people, and so they gave me a job, and we basically reviewed new music every week. But me and another guy got the job, and so I did it every fortnight. And but it was interesting because what we were reviewing like we'd play like the Abyssinians. I remember the first track I played on BBC in 1978 was the Abyssinians from I think it was the Rise album. But then the next track might be Michael Schenker Band, something like that. So it was totally random, which I quite like. It quite appeals to me. And that ran for 2 more years when this other program started called Spin-Off. So, and I just did a short bit in the middle of this program called Spin-Off, called Steve Spot or something like that, where I played 3 new tunes. And of course, what I was playing was a lot of what was then post-punk stuff, which was really quite interesting stuff. I might have like the Normal, playing the Normal on stuff from Mute, or a lot of the Manchester labels as well. And they realised after a bit that, hold on, this is more interesting than what the other people are doing, because they've just got 2 regular presenters on, so it gives Steve a programme. So then I presented Spin-Off, and then Spin-Off began on the wire after 4 years. Spin-Off was on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and a visionary manager, who must have been slightly ill, decided to put on the wire on a Sunday afternoon. It's like one of those things, do they know what they're buying, do they know what they're going to get? And we started in September 1984, and the first guests on the show in 1984 was Adrian Sherwood and Keith Blank, and Adrian's here tonight, I think. My old mate Adrian.
Not decrying your huge talent, obviously, but I mean, this almost sounds like he's from Lancashire.
Yeah.
He knows a bit about music. Stick him on for a bit. I mean, was it any more sophisticated than that?
No. No, they don't know what they're doing, Tony. I mean, you've got to realise, generally, people in media don't know what they do. And it just basically ends up with luck. And you've got to see that. I mean, I just listen to Radio 4 comedy. Yeah, I rest my case.
I'll try not to. So, in my albeit dim memories of this in the 80s, probably coming down from the night before, listening to you on a Sunday afternoon.
It was a great slog. If you think about it, I mean, basically, Sunday, I mean, people have been out, I mean, this is like different times, I suppose, but Sunday, people have been out Saturday, haven't they? They don't get up on Sunday till about, 11, 12, midday. This is like, 20, 30-year-olds, as I was at that time, or just out of it maybe. And so people just want to chill out and lie around, and basically On the Wire was there.
I mean, I was young at this point, and so a lot of the things that you were playing I wouldn't have heard of, but I mean, I always remember it kind of, to my mind, and I suppose it still is now, it was a weird mix of hyper-local, in that, I heard Manchester hip-hop acts on your show who I'd never heard of, other than outside of perhaps Dave Haslam's Debris, Fanzine, or things like that. And yet at the same time, obviously, you were playing loads of American black dance music. That seemed, in retrospect, to kind of hedge its way around what John Peel was doing, so you weren't copying that, yet doing something that obviously was then entirely different to everything else that was going on. I mean, how conscious was that? Did you design it in that way, or was that purely driven by, I don't know, the station's remit, so you've got to play some local stuff, or...?
No, well, first of all, the local stuff, we still play local stuff, but we don't get sent as many things because of the whole kind of instant fame that's now driving most of music shows. And so there's this thing on BBC local radio now called Introducing. So everybody sends tapes because it's like the local X Factor or whatever it is. It's very, demeaning really. But we had people try and do stuff, then. Because there was a feeling abroad, I think, that was still carried on from the punk era, that we want to do something new, so we had interesting things, I mean, we were playing like, you've got to remember that, we knew The Fall, we knew Half Man, Half Biscuit, we were playing these things,
Did you feel obliged to do it though, or was it part of the fact you're on BBC Lancashire?
No, Tony, it just happens. I was given no remit. Do a programme, Steve. I was given no remit. They didn't know what they created. They didn't know what they created. So basically, I mean, we played a lot of industrial hardcore stuff. We played dub reggae. We played a lot of doo-wop, rockabilly, not psychobilly. Played psychobilly. Rockabilly. We played rockabilly.
Very specific, but important definition.
Yeah. We played rockabilly next to dub. Yeah. And we played techno. New technos. I mean, and hip hop or electronised. It was known before hip hop and before rap. Yeah.
In terms of the dance music element of it, I forget where I read this. I think it was was it on the Wire website? But your disdain for what you described at the time in the mid-80s as the London dance mafia.
Yeah.
And so you were clearly kind of trying to do something different to what was happening, I suppose, on the rare groove scene in London.
Mm.
So what was that schism there, in your eyes? London's great, obviously. We love London.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it just seemed much easier to do things. In London, and London seemed much closer to the mainstream media as it was at that time. There were more clubs, and so they were all headed one direction. And as I was saying to some friends earlier on, if I had just done a reggae program, I'd have had lots more listeners than I've got, and I'd have been much more well known. Etc. Or I've just done a techno program. I imagine doing a techno program for 40 years, for God's sake. And but we just wanted. We were interested in the clash and the range, the whole kind of broad range of things. We're also interested in things that were exciting in themselves. So they all had some qualities of themselves. So if we weren't going to play them, who was going to play them? Like nobody really.
Is it fair to say that you identify a specific kind of northwest dance music culture that had obviously been informed from Northern Soul onwards very much by Black American music, and you felt that was underrepresented nationally on radio particularly?
No. We just played what we wanted. I mean, we had some like...
So you're just being unnecessarily aggro with people from London.
Exactly. And why not? No, I had a few good friends in the north, who were never, because they never get the headlines, like Roger Eagle, who was one of the original DJs at the Twisted Wheel in Manchester. And if there's anybody responsible for the whole kind of northwest interest and excitement and involvement in black music, whether it be Northern Soul, R&B or whatever, it was Roger, and but lots of other people have taken the credit over the years as they tend to do. Roger was such an incredible music enthusiast and a kind of beacon for us all. I mean, I remember him putting on Laverne Baker in Liverpool, and about 20 people turned up, Laverne Baker, for God's sake, absolute kind of 20th century classic genius of American black music, superstar. About 20 people turned up, so he lost a fortune, and that was Roger. He was still buying box sets of weird R&B artists, 2 weeks before he died.
That's the way you want to go out, presumably.
Exactly. or maybe, weird 7-inch pre that I've been looking at for a long time. But I'll tell you something else about Roger, and this is like a classic thing. He was a total maniac. He went round to a friend of mine, another friend who did the On the Wire poster, Steve Hartstaff. He took some dub albums round to Roger, because Roger was a big R&B fan. And he said, listen to these dub albums, Roger, might get into these. And he went back to see him a couple of weeks later in his flat on Lark Lane in Liverpool. And before he went up, he went in the second-hand shop down the street, so there was everything in, and all the dub albums, Roger had sold them all. This is the guy who became later as the big dub expert in the Northwest. But it's a typical story. Roger.
So, obviously, you're one of the first people to play hip-hop in this country on the radio. That became part of why people were sharing cassettes of the programme nationally. Obviously, you love the music, but I know you've talked about it felt political at the time. You'll probably think this is far too grand a statement to make, but I mean, even then, the way you talk about reggae and the way you talk about hip-hop, it seems like it's a bit of a culture war prior to the culture war being a kind of accepted term. You felt like you were doing something subversive, or certainly felt you were exposing something which at the time was marginalised. Is that fair?
Absolutely fair. I didn't feel like I was doing something. I knew I was doing something subversive. I used to get this in Blackburn, which is where On the Wire is based. When we started off on the Wire, we used to get regular threatening phone calls from National Front or whatever it was, equivalent was at the time. My wife used to run an all-female girl DJ group called WOW International, Women in the World International, where she used to play like hip-hop and Latin house and other stuff, and they were attacked on numerous occasions by some of the local NF groups. So we knew we were doing something that could have been unpopular. It wasn't easily assimilated into the airwaves of the Northwest.
Have you ever felt any discomfort about being a middle-aged white man who, rightly or wrongly?
No, I'm an old white man.
Well, now, but at that time, you're a middle-aged white man essentially acting as a kind of gatekeeper for black music. It's interesting, obviously, you gave, I think it was the third episode of On the Wire over to Lee Scratch Perry for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Were you kind of acutely aware that this wasn't necessarily your culture to kind of interpret for people? Obviously, your personality has never been forefront in the programme. It's essentially been there's the music. But were you coming through now and there were so few avenues for that music to get exposure through? I suppose some people would find it slightly problematic that you're this white guy kind of telling people what is great in hip-hop and reggae. Did you ever feel self-conscious about that? Or at the time with the so few outlets that you kind of thought, well, it's either me or nothing, really?
Exactly. That was it. At the time, there was. You just need to look back. I've noticed that there's a lot of revisionism in media. That people go back and rewrite things about how things were, and it wasn't like that. It was actually tough. Yeah, people found it tough, and there wasn't anything on radio. John Peel. Remember how John Peel ended up? Yeah, doing the Home Truths programme. That's how John Peel ended up. So there wasn't anything on radio. And if anybody had actually come forward, then fine, I would be accepting about it. But there was who else was going out and interviewing like Dennis Brown and Culture, staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning to hear quotes from the Book of Isaiah by Joe Hill. No, very few people, and I didn't see any other radio stations there. So, but I'd always be ready for an argument, although the argument would be in retrospect. But nobody stepped forward.
Although I seem to remember you telling me that Tommy Vance, famous heavy metal, I suppose that's the way of putting it in them days, DJ, used to play a bit of reggae as well?
Yeah, Tommy was a big reggae fan, yeah.
Right. Well, as a separate programme on radio, was this? Is it before my time, this, or you just drop a bit in between
He was back in Capital, wasn't it?
Right. Right.
No, we used to have heavy metals. We used to have I don't think it's been often recognised or understood, but we used to have a heavy metal section in the early on the wires.
Right. I don't remember that, thankfully.
It was Uncle Joe Wilson, who now does the religious programme. He's winning awards for religious programming. Because the reason was because there wasn't anything else. You know, I had that was actually replaced by Dr. Alan Woods, who now runs a bike shop in Wigan, who did the American hardcore slot, which was great for a few years. Yeah.
So, in these first couple of years then, so second show was it? You had Depeche Mode in?
Yeah.
And thousands of screaming girls outside?
No, they were outside the wrong place, they were outside the King George's Hall.
All right.
where they were playing, they didn't realise the B, the local radio.
And then 12 months later, pretty much, you put the fall on at Clitheroe Castle.
Clitheroe Castle.
So, for anybody who doesn't know Clitheroe, which I presume is everybody, little market town in the middle of nowhere. So everybody troops out from Manchester, from Victoria, out on the train. 2,000 people turn up to this.
Yeah.
So
one policeman.
If I'm a station manager at BBC Lancashire, then I presume I'd kind of notice this was happening. So clearly they must have been carrying you on their shoulders around the building every day at the success you brought them.
No.
I mean, did anybody care? Because this surely was exposure for them. The very fact you've got Depeche Mode to come out to Blackburn in the early 80s surely is, you know, a victory in itself. They must have been...
What's wrong with Blackburn?
Nothing at all, but, you know, it's a backwater for people who live in Manchester and mind Depeche Mode.
That's correct.
So, you know...
That's correct. That's an interesting point, though, because I remember Tony Wilson, he was the one who sucked everything into Manchester, didn't he? It's like Joy Division were from Macclesfield. No, they weren't, they were from Manchester. It's not easy to accept on the headlines, is it? Yeah.
Well, you know, I presume somebody at the station was kind of mildly impressed.
No.
No. Absolutely nothing.
No.
Why? Why were they so oblivious to this?
It's very difficult to say. Well, basically, it's because they don't understand. They don't know what's going on. I mean, I will take a broader view now, Tony, because we might go on to talk about the time we were being thrown off the air. But the most kind of feedback you get usually is negative feedback. Negative feedback. That's the feedback. Although now, if you look at specialist programs, you very rarely get it because they don't understand them. Nobody understands them.
Is Mark correct that your photo still isn't in the lobby? Because you've moved recently, haven't you? So
yeah, it's not in the lobby now.
It's not in the lobby. Is that by your choice, or did they not ask yet again?
Well, they took a series of photos, but they lost them.
Conveniently. So you were threatened in the early 90s with being taken off the air, and then in 2012 again. Mm. So how safe do you now feel, obviously at the time, and please explain why you were saved, but I mean, are you at a point now whereby they know if they try and take you off the air, there will be enough of an outcry that it will become embarrassing?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that because things have changed, and that's because I, like many other people, have worked out how not to be vilified and abused on social media. I don't use Tweet or Facebook, so that's changed, hasn't it? But in the 1991, I think, when we were first, it might be 92, 91, I think it was, when the threat was being taken off, it was in the period of, and excuse me if this is a kind of history lesson in British media, it was the John Bird period, where the BBC finally were trying to get its act together and come to the kind of modern world, and all become professional media people. Yeah. So there are all these new media types popping out of the BBC corporate pod, and it's a bit like a science fiction programme, and being sent abroad across the nation to manage stations into the new era. So we've got this young chap called Chris Van Shake, dressed very snappily, and
immediately suspicious.
Yeah. He spoke to me. He said, had a quick chat, very pleasant. He said he listened to the programme, and I said, good, let me know what you think. So a few weeks went past and I didn't hear from him, and so I thought I'll ask him, what does he think? And he said, well, because I'm working as a civil servant, so I turn up. I'm quite a respectable kind of guy, you know. I turn up, I'm quite smart, so I'm quite well groomed and everything. And he said, it wasn't quite what I was expecting. I said, what were you expecting? He said, well, something like Dire Straits, you know. I said, oh. So it didn't last too much longer, but I realised, you know, it was about to end, as it were. And so it went on, and there was a wholesale changes. And there were two programmes that generated a lot of interest in terms of being cut. One was On the Wire, and the other one was the church programme, the religious programme on the morning, because the guy who ran that had good connects with the local bishops. So anyway, these campaigns started, and central to running these campaigns was a guy who a good friend of mine, who unfortunately died last year, called Planet Jackson. And he did a lot of work on, because I couldn't actually do anything, you know. I could be seen to be working to keep the programme on. So all this campaign happened separate to me, and there were loads of people I've been dealing with over the years that just came forward. People like Daniel Miller from Mute, Martin Mills from Beggars, and Jeff Travis, Rough Trade, a load of people who were then like much more independent than they are now, because times has changed. And there was a big campaign of letter writing, but there was also stuff in the media, and there was a programme on Radio 4 that gave us a good write-up. He said when you listen to On the Wire, it feels like you've landed on a different planet.
The ultimate planet.
Yeah. And Martin Kellner wrote a piece in The Independent, and it coincided with the BBC board meeting in Manchester that took place on the Thursday after the last On the Wire had gone out. And the manager was called to in front of the BBC board. I think it was Marmaduke Hussey at the time who was the chair of the board, and he was told to keep the programme. And as it was a unique, I quote in the press release, unique BBC product. And so the guy had to come back and tell me, which was one of the best experiences I've had in my life. Not that On the Wire was, but to watch him tell me. And I said to Chris, I said to him, yeah, I said, well, I know you haven't been here long, Chris, I know you haven't been in that position, but you know, something I've learned in management is every crisis can be a learning experience. So I just twisted the knife there. And we came on like that, but lots of people, we lost a lot of listeners to us. I thought we finished, of course.
Was 2012 less of a close call?
Less of a close call, I think, because it was general. Van Shea did actually come back, and we got moved from Sunday afternoon to Thursday evening, 2 hours. So the perfection of a Sunday afternoon was lost. So we're no longer able to stretch like we used to, you know, over a period.
I mean, you're obviously in a weird situation now, because I presume the listening figures online far exceed who stays up till midnight to listen to it. You know. So, do they appreciate that? I mean, is there any sense of there being any value in that? You would have thought, even at some kind of abstract level, you know, a regional radio station would enjoy the fact they've got this kind of quirky thing which, you know, people around the world listen to.
No, not really. I mean, just put up with this. Because they know if they change it, then there'll be a lot of problems, really. And they wait for me to die or something in front of the mic or something like that. So, no, it's true. I mean, it's difficult to take on board. It sounds like everything might be planned, you know. But no, they just like leave us. It's too much of a problem to actually do something. Yeah.
You touched on this earlier, so I won't expect too much positivity. But I mean, in the round, how do you view radio at the moment? What do you listen to? Where do you find solace personally?
Radio 3, which I think is one of the areas of the BBC which I think has improved vastly over the years. And nowhere else really. I don't listen to any other music shows on radio apart from Random, Radio 3, and generally not Lake Junction. I guess I find it a bit too precious, really. So Random, classical and modern composition on Radio 3. Really. Because really I've got too much stuff, you know, to listen to myself, really, I suppose. So and I suppose I might be frightened of anybody else dictating some taste to me. I don't know. I'd love to be able to. I'd love to be able to find something where you can be turned on to music, but I find it a bit, you know, tedious, really.
When we spoke for Resident Advisor a while ago, you said you'd shoot all celebrity DJs.
Yeah.
Even nice people like Guy Garvey and Jarvis
He'd
Cocker.
be the first.
I mean, is that the real problem? That obviously music fans can't even get a look in because unless you actually have a profile these days, you can't get on the radio in any form.
Yeah, I really don't know what the answer is, but it's a bit poor, isn't it? You know, it's poor. I don't think they understand that they've if you remember Smashing 90, of course, and how true that caricature was, they don't understand they've actually returned it to the Smashing. I mean, they're exactly the same, aren't they? All the DJs that are exactly the same as Smashing 90, and they all feel that they're entitled as well. You know, and they all move around in the same clique. And they're all and I mean, to say the truth, it's
put them on a 1 week freelance contract.
Yeah,
and, you know,
I mean,
see how they fare then.
I don't sit there with people throwing tunes at me. You know, I don't have an assistant. I don't have assistants. The only people who work for me, or with me, I should say, they don't work for me because I can't pay them, is an engineer called Jimi, who's been with me 15 years. We've only had 3 in 40 years engineers, Mike Martin, Jethro, who's here today, I've got to say, at the back there, Jethro, who moved up to Glasgow, and Jimi and Jim Ingle. None of them were paid. Fenny's worked with me over the years.
So Jim doesn't work for BBC Lancashire?
No,
I presumed he was an engineer who just, you know, did other shows and did yours.
No, none of us are paid. No, none of them that I've paid. I recently got a 44% pay increase from the BBC, which you might think is like big news, but I can tell you it's very small news. Okay.
You described the figure previously to me as buttons, so it's now
big buttons.
Slightly larger buttons.
Yeah.
Press buttons.
And I've had Pete Hagen and Andy Manhattan, two kind of funk DJs, playing on the show for a long time. They're not paid. We're not paid. No, not paid the rate. It is actually incredible. But I mean, what's been going on in the BBC? We talk about, you know, reported pay. Most people in the BBC in the regions who are doing specialist shows do it for next to nothing. Next to nothing.
I think your approach, you'll dispute this obviously, is quite old-fashioned, patrician. It's about educating the listener. We live in an era now, obviously, where people can go online and find, you know, their niche musically, and there'll be a radio station that services that internationally. You know, I suppose one extra was kind of Radio 1's response to that, in that they wanted to capture black music fans and kind of, you know, stem that flow away from Radio 1, which, in fairness to it, has become far more multicultural in the last few years. How do you regard that? I mean, obviously your attitude is, I need to force these people to listen to some stuff that they don't like. I mean, do you see this kind of way that people can now talk to themselves in a, you know, echo chamber of their own taste quite, you know, a deleterious thing, really?
Yeah, I think it's demeaning. I mean, the whole thing about on the wire originally used to be juxtapositioning, you know, so you used to get shocked from one kind of thing to the next. Now it's not so much juxtaposition, because, but generally, you know, people tune in because I think a lot of people either tune in because they like reggae and they listen to a lot of reggae, or they like to hear something new that's going to surprise them and excite them and entertain them. That's the reason they listen. So they're not listening to stuff that they're not tuning in to listen to stuff they've heard 1,000 times before. So that's the whole thing. And I suppose I'm patrician in the Reithian sense of it's not educate, but educate, inform and entertain. I think that idea is still valid for a broadcaster.
Unpopular as it is at the moment, though, when people don't seem to want to take any guidance from experts in any field.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm expert at getting away with it.
Careful at not presenting yourself in that way. So, you know. Just to rewind again, because I think this period's particularly kind of interesting on the Wire's history, but the old acid house thing in the northwest.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated by this because you're mid-30s at this point.
Yeah.
Weren't a clubber.
No.
I mean, how did you experience this music and how excited were you by it? I mean, it strikes me somehow you've been able to kind of be one reserve from all these things, really. You know, you've stood aside from them. Obviously, people are going out doing loads of drugs in Manchester and around the northwest, listening to mad music all night. You're there kind of observing it and seeming to vibe off that as a phenomena without quite getting involved in it on a kind of clubbing and even DJing level. I mean, you weren't DJing out particularly at that time, were you? So what excited you about it?
Well, I would have DJed, if anybody had asked me to. DJ, I wouldn't pay me a few quid. I mean, I did DJ. We did a fantastic gig at King George's Hall. Me and Andy Holmes and Wow Sounds. And it was called The Slammer, and it was an acid house night. And we had 1,500 in.
So why did you feel compelled to do that then? And also you did there was a gig at the Ritz, which has kind of gone down in Manchester legend.
Yeah.
808 State, guy called Gerald, Adrian, Nana Cherry.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks for me.
Annie Bandes, Gary Clare. Yeah, 1,800.
So you'd been on...
Yeah, Nana came when
by your own admission though, you'd not been one for going out to clubs. You didn't have mates who wanted to go with you particularly, but then why did you kind of push slightly at that point and think, you know, the gigs at King George's Hall, for instance, I mean, why did you feel you needed to do that at that point? You must have been buzzing off the whole kind of cultural phenomenon of this at some level.
Well,
or you just thought there was a few quid in it?
Well, no, I mean, what I'd seen in Blackburn was a fairly conservative music town. Right? You know, what we'd had there, the clubs like Golden Palms, you know, Mecca, you know, these kind of things. So it was just I was just intrigued to see if we could run a gig and get a load of people out to listen, and it was really popular. I was really surprised. I really quite enjoyed it.
I mean, you may be contradicting me here slightly now. You're saying that, you know, had more people ask you, you would have DJed more.
Well, it depends.
You've given the impression you didn't like DJing in clubs particularly.
Well,
is that wrong?
Well, I haven't had that enough experience to tell you to come to a decision. Hacienda asked me to DJ. In fact, they showed me round, but I asked them for too much money. I asked Dave Haslam how much he was getting. I doubled it. Because I didn't want to do the gig, basically. I mean, why do you want to do that?
But you were determined not to learn to beat match. admirable in my eyes, but you know, what was it about that you thought was so bad?
Well, it's a bit
Stylistically.
sad. Yeah, a bit sad, isn't it? I'm going to play a load of records and you're not going to notice the joy in, you know, what kind of challenge is that?
You should tell everybody about what you thought was your peak moment, was it, at the Ritz, where you went from acid house to a dub record? So.
Yeah, I was playing a new groove tune, I think it was, which was a fairly standard house thing at the time. And I dropped a King Tubby, but nobody left the dance floor. That was my peak. That's my peak as a DJ.
But you feel that wasn't sustainable long term?
No way. I wanted to test it out else in other areas.
Although we should say, actually, you've got 2 club gigs coming up, haven't you? You were in a new purple period, so Rhythm Section in London on December the 14th, is it?
That's right, yeah.
Then you're playing in Glasgow on Rum Shack, February the 2nd.
Yeah.
So.
But I did do, what I did do is I did play a lot of gigs in China. I did the first dubstep gig in China.
So we should explain that. We're going to come on to that. So
I did loads of gigs. DJ
so working for the British Council in the glamorous world of IT, you ended up living in China for 10 years.
Yeah.
And continue to do On The Wire through this time.
Yes, incredible. It was Blackburn and Beijing. Half it was from Beijing, half it was from Blackburn. And this was never commented on, no stories about it, no views, no quirky comments, anywhere on Radio Lancashire or anywhere in the BBC. 10 years from Beijing to Blackburn. Yeah.
So
every week.
Technically, how did this work then? I'm interested to know now.
Well, basically, me and a mate, Christian Virant of FM3, you may know FM3, who did the Buddha Machine, worldwide success, meditative listening. We used to sneak into the BBC bureau because our mate Rupert Wingfield Hayes, who's now the BBC correspondent in Japan, used to let us go in and use the studio on a Saturday.
I will view him in an entirely different light now.
Top guy, Rupert. And we used to record an hour of tunes, and we used to wing it over to Jim back in the studio in Blackburn, and it'd stick the 2 bits together.
And nobody ever noticed at BBC Lancashire?
No. I say you're not bothered, they're not bothered. They'd be more interested in doing a show like It'd Be Remarkable if it was Bake Up linking up with Blackpool, but not Blackburn and Beijing.
So while you were out there, I think you were kind of instrumental in Code 9 getting his first gigs out there and stuff, so
yeah.
You became this kind of weird conduit between China and Britain for instrumental grime artists.
And dub, there was a lot of dub people came out. Adrian came out, he did a few gigs out in China, and Code 9, Sam Shackleton came out, Pinch came out, DJ Pinch. Quite a few people, and because a mate of mine, Gaz from Blossom, runs a club in Shanghai called Shelter, which I used to gig at regularly.
So you mentioned Adrian there. We should talk about your association with On New Sound. So I think you would say you're not a frustrated musician, but you did have this kind of I don't know. You tell us what you did for On New Sound and what your role was, or.
First met Adrian after speaking to him on the phone when he was pre-On New Sound, when he did a thing called 4D Rhythms, and he had an office, Windmill Street actually, right? An office Windmill Street in the West End, and I met him. We did an interview for radio and played some Creation Rebel and what have you, and because I used to travel to London quite regularly, then I used to meet him on many occasions, and we used to spend happy nights many times, just me and him at Southern Studio, when he was doing mixes of all sorts of stuff. So I remember one of the best ones I remember, an album that's still a stone classic, I'm not sure it is, I don't think it's actually been reissued, I'm not sure, is Keith LeBlanc's Major Malfunction, that happened like a couple of weeks after the the space shuttle blew up. And Adrian in Southern, he used. It was an interesting transition period from analog into digital, and he used and they had a few pieces of kit in there from AMS. Funnily enough, a company based in Burnley, Queen's water industry winner for sound equipment, and there was a piece of kit, and Adrian will tell you what it was, but he used to be able to capture. He used to give it a sample. It wasn't called a sample. He used to captured sound was the expression. It's all the stuff. This is it wasn't called samples, it was called captured sound. And he used to slot it into the tunes. And basically that started me, I think, on the back of being a kind of sound archivist for Adrian and hunting out loads of samples for him to use from all over the place.
So that was your main role then?
Well, I used to keep him awake as well. through many nights of mixing down.
So we should let you play some music soon.
Yeah. Talking about one of the best ones, of course, was a doo-wop sample that ended up on a remix Adrian did of for Depeche Mode, People of People, which is well worth exploring.
And you were feeding samples back from China as well while you were over there to various dubstep producers, weren't you? So
of course, yeah.
Your little footnote in the history of Sino, in the short history of Sino grime.
Yeah, Sino grime, yeah.
So yeah, you're going to play some tunes soon. So how long are you going to continue doing On The Wire for, and what do you hope its legacy will be? Can you hand it on to somebody eventually?
No, there's nobody apparent at the moment. I'm waiting for somebody to come forward and say, I can do that, Steve, I'll take it over. I suppose there might be some signals that I might be wanting to give up, but I can't think of any that's actually occurring at the moment because
I'm saying this like you've got 6 months to live, I should say. It's perfectly in good health and may continue for many, many years to come.
Well, I'm surprised it's lasted this long, really, but just keep on doing it. But I still like hearing new tunes. I mean, there's so many fantastic, there's so much, what kind of keeps me going, there's so much good stuff coming out now, as much as ever. And what keeps me going, not only is that good stuff coming out, but it doesn't get played anywhere, I mean, you read about it on lots of blogs and maybe in The Wire or on some of the odd magazines, but nobody plays this stuff on radio, and there are other shows that are on kind of terrestrial radio that play this. I'd like to know what they are, because I don't know what they are. And it's a small world, is the media, of course. Of course, you can listen to them on thousands of blogs and whatever right across the internet. I used to have this theory when I started. The issue with music for me was because I grew up in an era where I'd read about like music, but I couldn't get a hold of it. It was really frustrating, I mean, I'm a big fan of country blues, and if you cut like all my collection down, the kernel of the collection of record collection I have is a lot of like dusty old country blues albums, I bought when I was quite young. And so I thought, I used to think that the issue with music is access, there's a lot of music out there, you can't access it. And now, all the music is out there, and you can access it. So the thing, from the 70s to now, the thing is totally flipped, hasn't it? But it's total chaos, isn't it? Basically, when you think about it. It was actually, there's some few people doing like some great curating jobs here and there, but it's certainly not on the BBC and some of its allied media outlets.
You never there then 2 days out from the show thinking, I can't be honest with this week. I mean, literally, I say that not glibly. I mean, I think for most people, I'm 45. I'd say my interest in music has kind of, it's been consistent, but there's been times when I've been in a bit of a kind of like, you know, is there anything I'm not interested about at the moment that I'm that excited about? But you've never had that then? You've never had a period where you thought, you know, either I'm not understanding a lot of stuff that's coming through and I don't think I'm particularly getting it, or just generally you've thought, well, I'm just not hearing anything I'm that excited about?
I think it may have been a bit like that before I went to China, actually, Tony. And going to China, the fact that it was like difficult to source music digitally at that time. So I went out there in 2002, so things have changed greatly since then. So it was almost like a technical challenge for me then. So can you keep this going? And it made me actually listen a lot more. And obviously, I was also interested in a lot of Chinese music at that time, which I was able to put through on the wire, but still not played elsewhere across the radio though. Because mainly because Chinese bands aren't interested. If you're big in China, you don't need anybody else. You know? I mean, big in Japan was different things. Big in China.
But you're still buzzing going in there then to record the show fundamentally.
Yeah, well, actually, I still have to do the same thing. You know, I don't sit at home like putting some music and putting a playlist together. You know, what they have now in the BBC is this new this new system called Vialor, which stands for something, and I conveniently forgot it. And we all got trained on it a few months ago. And this is a thing where, for music, so if you think about BBC local radio, or BBC at all, I mean, most of, a good percentage of its output, certainly local radio, is music. Yeah. How much it is, you know, 40%, 60%, I don't really know, but it's a big chunk, isn't it? And I've always had the view most music on local radio is a way to get from a traffic report to a news report. Yeah, and it doesn't matter what the music is. And so it used to be very inconvenient because people, to get from the traffic report to the news report, you had to go to a gram library upstairs, yeah, and choose stuff. Yeah, so they started having playlists. But actually beyond that now, with the Vialor system, there are two control rooms, one in Broadcasting House and one in another place. I think it's called Wood Normanton or somewhere like some bizarre place. Anyway, they've got these servers with all the BBC music on. So if you're doing...
This is probably top secret information you shouldn't be telling us, lest anybody go and destroy these silos.
I believe in transparency, as does the BBC. And so basically I'm doing a drive time show, and you press the button and it gives you your playlist. Yeah. And so you slot all your ABBA, and if you want to do something else, like you're a specialist, then they say what you do is you enter it all on the computer. But I only ever played stuff once. It's very rarely I play a tune twice, because of the nature of what we do, you know, play new stuff all the time. So why would I go through entries upon the computer? So what we do now is exactly what we did before this new system started. We just record it all down, we don't drag anything in from a computer. And the manager said to me, well, what you get on this new system is it tells you on the DAB that what's playing now, which I find great actually. On Radio 3, you know, quite often Jan, my wife, says, hey, what's that? You know, and I rush up to the radio and tell her it's something from 13 seconds, wherever it is. It's really good, you know. And what does that do for local radio? What's that? It's ABBA Waterloo. Oh, really? I've never heard that before. You know, it's a kind of bizarre consequence. So we don't do that, you know. And what I still do is what I've always done. I come in with like what is it? A bag of tunes. It's on a Mac, and I've got a skin. It's like a mixing desk. And when I arrive, I don't know what I'm going to play. I do not have a running order.
Steve Barker, fighting the bureaucratic powers to the end. Thank you very much.
We're going to do questions, Tony.
If anybody's got any, speak up, yeah?
We don't.
Oh, somebody at the back there with a hand up, yeah?
So you mentioned you were one of the first people to play rap music. I mean, I grew up in Birmingham, so obviously no access to BBC Lancashire at all whatsoever. So for me, the first thing was John Peel, like everyone else. But did you ever play Ruthless Rap Assassins from Manchester?
Yeah, Ruthless Rap Attack, yeah. Rap Assassins, I think they're called. Yeah. Ruthless Rap Assassins from Manchester, and also Fixed Penalty from Preston. Yeah, and Crispy.
The legendary Fixed Penalty.
Yeah, and Crispy 3 from Chorley. Who went
Crispy
on,
3 were big.
They were very big, and Mikey Dunn is still DJing around from Crispy 3, big DJ in Manchester now. Actually, one of the best memories of two great memories of that period of early hip hop. One was I went with my old friend David Toob to the Shaw Theatre on Euston Road. I don't know if it's still there. And it was a tiny little theatre, about 200 people. And we went to see Africa Bambaataa, DJ Jazzy Joyce, and DJ Red Alert. Me, David and Sue Stewart, and about 30 other people at the time, which was a fantastic experience. And so, but it was seen at that stage, as a kind of a cultural expression, blah, blah, blah. And the other one I remember was going to the Apollo in Manchester for the Def Jam tour. I think it was in 87 or 88. Yeah. This is one where LL Cool J came down on a big ghetto blaster. It was lowered and he was stood on this big ghetto blaster. It was a fantastic gig. And it was Public Enemy, and they had the Utsis on stage, health and safety. Anyone?
You won't get away with that.
Eric B. and Rakeem. And I went with Jan, my wife Jan, and there were us and about 2016, 14 to 16-year-olds. We were sat at the back, and when it started, they all went right in front of me, and Jan were the only people left. It was amazing. I think I felt really weird at that stage. So the other one I remember is going to see the launch of Def Jam and meeting Russell Simmons in London when the Beastie Boys did a little gig, and invited to that by what's the guy who used to Paul Oakenfold, who used to be do promo. That's one good thing Paul did.
Just after that, the other band I have to mention from Manchester, Hijack, the terrorist crew. That's what they called themselves.
Yes, I think I recall that, but I don't think I played them.
Jericho. It's John Peel played them, man. That's
good old John.
My friend.
No, I should mention actually that when I talked about getting chucked off air in night, John was also very instrumental in helping us stay on air, and I visited him a few times, and he was a real gentleman and very kind to me. Good old John.
I think we can all agree with that. Right. Oh, sorry. One more question, Amy.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, mine's not a question.
Oh.
But I'd just like to point out that I think Steve Barker and On the Wire is as relevant as it ever was. And I've got so much to thank Steve for. Steve was the first person to let me talk on the radio when I was a work experience student at Radio Lancashire. And I'm now in London. I present the music news for Six Music. I was late tonight because I was recording with Iggy Pop. It's like, all of this comes back to On the Wire. And this is only 3 years ago. Like, Steve was the first person, I was working there for a week, and it just happened to be the same week that Lee Perry was performing in Manchester, and I'd mentioned it to somebody at Radio Lancashire. And I said, oh, I think Steve Barker's got some connection with Lee Perry.
See, somebody does love you.
Yeah. And I got on, I sent Steve an email straight away, and he called me back and was like, do you want to do a little package for us? And honestly, I've got so much to thank him for, and like, what a total legend. And yeah, celebrating 40 years on the BBC this year, so like, thank you, Steve.
I think that's a good note to end on. I like all of that, so cheers.
Thank you to Tony for excellent, deft handling of questions. Thank you to Steve. Steve has come down with a quantity. I think there's only about 20 of these fantastic posters. Original. They've been in a cupboard somewhere for 30 odd years. On the wire posters. He was going to give them away, and I said, why don't we actually, guys, on the bar, they're raising money for HIV charity. So let's try and sell these. £5 each. Go and see Dan over there. They're absolutely fantastic and they're very rare. So let's try and raise some money and do some good. But thank you, everyone. Tell them now he's DJing.
Sorry, yeah, unless anybody didn't get that bit, Steve's going to DJ for the next couple of hours. So, yeah, if that passed anybody by, definitely stay around for that. Cheers.